Allo? Sì? Sì? Agora. Hi, everybody. I'm very happy to stay here. The first question is, someone don't understand English and need the translation in Italian? No. Perfetto. Perfetto. First of all, excuse me about my English because I am not current in this language, but I am a little courage. Before starting, I want to thank the Bologna Fair for opening this space for reflection and for us to be here discussing this topic. And also thank our guests and all for you too. The theme, translating connections, has been present in the reflections proposed at the fair as a result of gaining visibility for voices that until recently had no space in the editorial market, as well as children placed on the sidelines and deprived of their minimum rights. Discussing translating connections refers to how in each of these connected countries and regions the issue of Afro-descendants arises and asserts itself. In the case of this table, we would like to address how these traditions, these other cosmogonies, interfere and act, for example, towards anti-racist education. What is the role and influence on editorial production? How this bridge is established and this heritage materialized in literature for children and young adults? Sorry. To move these discussions forward, we invite illustrators, reading mediators, authors, and editors from Colombia, Brazil, Nigeria, and USA. To make better use of the time, we organize ourselves into two rounds of questions. The first, after a brief presentation of each one, they will talk about the importance of Afro-descendant literature in the children's and young people literature market of each country. In the second round, the question will be how each one contributes to this statement, whether as an editor, illustrator, or reading promoter. I have also apologized in advance to all the guests, as we must be very strict with the time because we have a little time. And the suggestion of the order of the table is start with Di Pacho, the illustrator, after all our publisher, and the mediator. Please, Di Pacho.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the invitation for this table. I'm very happy to be here and proud to show also the work of my country, Colombia. And so I will begin. In Colombia, I will talk about picture books because I am author and illustrator of picture books. So what I know, what I can talk is about that. And talking about Afro-Colombian books, the most of the production that had been made was from 2000 until now, 2010 more or less. So was a kind of invisibility of the in the illustration of the Afro culture. So I think the beginning of the beginning of the books, the illustrators showing Afro-Colombian stories were not for Afro-Colombian authors, were more different kind of authors making that histories. So I think it's a kind of recognition of our culture, but still not having that representation of authors. Um, Colombia is a country with 50 million people. 10% of the population is Afro-Colombian, and this is 5 million people. So in the American continent, Colombia is the fourth most populated Afro country, after United States, Brazil, Haiti, and after that Colombia. So for me, it's like, why Colombia have not a more strong production of Afro books, no? Books with Afro contents. So Afro-Colombian authors begin to appear and illustrators for picture books recently, like 10 years ago. And one of the publishers that just began to publish Afro authors was Cataplum with Candelario Obeso. So after that begins other publishers like Lazo with this book that is Chocó, that is the Pacific coast of Colombia, who have the most population of this Afro-descendant. And the Belia Vidal is one of the most representative authors now, writer. And yes, this is the new books that are made in like 5 years ago, 10 years ago. So I think it's like an opening and a beginning in my country of this necessity that we have. And it's also the necessity in our continent. In South America, I think still have not that representation as we need. Yes, until here.
The first round.
No, thank you. Thank you very much for having me. It's nice to be here. I suppose the most important question that kept coming to my mind when I was asked to contribute to this panel, and of course perhaps for many years, is how is it that an African country where 99% of the people who live there are black have failed and continue to fail to create books where you will find African stories and beautiful, high-quality stories and illustrations. And this is very important as a starting point. My name is Lola Shonei. I'm a writer, a publisher, a bookseller, and I organize 2 festivals in my country, Nigeria. And I'm sure you'll understand how each of these things have helped me arrive at the point where I have seen and have a very clear idea of the book world in my country. So there are 2 things, basically. One of them, for our sins, our colonial past, means that a lot of the books that you will find in Nigeria, especially children's books, have been shipped in from the UK. In the last 20 years, we also have a number of books from the US, and recently there's a whole influx of titles from India. So our youngest children are reading books where you have children that do not look like them. This is not only dangerous, but it impacts their self-esteem in a way that I think is very harmful. I'm sure you'll agree. So where the story started for me was that I was given this assignment to go and put 100 libraries in 100 state schools in northern Nigeria, where we have 20 million out-of-school children. And I went there armed with the books that were available to me. Gruffalo, Elmer. I thought to myself, let me take, you know, the well-read books from the UK. And I have a confession. In 2010, I wrote a children's book for my son. But I kind of hid that book because I thought, I'm not famous, nobody knows me, let me not read this book, but I'll just kind of hide it. So I spent a lot of my life being a school teacher. And as soon as I got to a school in northern Nigeria, I begged the teacher, I said, please, let me read to the children. I love reading to children. And she said, oh, yes, yes, no problem. So the children sat around me, and I brought out my little Elmer, and I opened it, and I started reading, and they were looking at each other like maybe I was a bit crazy. So I said, okay, hold on. Then I brought out the Gruffalo book, and that didn't have the desired effect either. It was so abstract for them. So I said, you know what, let me give this, my little book, a try. So I pulled it out and I opened it. And as soon as I opened it, they started nudging each other and laughing. And as I was turning the pages, they started imitating all the illustrations. And what I often say is that as a writer, reader, editor, whatever, for the last 27 years, I founded my first publishing house when I was 23. I have spent a lifetime talking about representation, but it was not until that moment that I fully understood the meaning of it and how important it is for children when they're seeing a book to see individuals who actually look like them, to see their landscapes, to see their ways of life. It has a very, very positive impact on their psyche and the way that they see themselves. And I think my time is up.
Good afternoon. My name is Wade Hudson, and my wife and I, and this is my wife, Cheryl Hudson, and believe it or not, we have been married for 50 years. Can you believe it? Oh, we got married the same year you were born. And 35 years ago, Cheryl and I started our own book publishing company called Just Us Books. And we started our company basically for the same reason that you've been discussing. We recognized that there was a need for books, particularly for black youngsters, that reflected black history, black culture, and black experiences. There were very few books being printed at that particular time. The handful of books that were published did not really find their way into the mainstream marketplace. So we could not find books for our youngsters who are now adults. So rather than continue to complain about the lack of these books, Cheryl and I said that we would take a step of faith, start our own book publishing company. And in doing so, what we realized was that we were following in the footsteps of our ancestors who had done wonderful things in the past because they had to, because of enslavement, because of Jim Crow, because of the misfortunes of a misguided Reconstruction. So we had to create our own institutions, our own businesses. So in establishing Just Us Books, that's what we were doing. Now, before we started our company, we actually had gone to several major publishing houses with ideas for manuscripts that we had developed. And we were told by one editor that there was no market for these books because the manuscripts focused on black history and black culture. Another editor told us that black people don't buy books. And we knew that that was not true, that we were trying to find books for our own youngsters, but we could not find them. So the problem was books that would interest black families, black kids were not available. So in starting our company, we think that we sort of helped to reset that way of thinking by showing that there was indeed a market for these books. As I said, we've been around now for 35 years. We published hundreds of books under our own imprint, but we've also partnered with major publishing houses too to bring out books that we know are needed. We partnered with Penguin Random House. We've also partnered with Scholastic. But again, Just Us Books, our own company, is very important to us because we are more than a business. We are an institution in our communities. And many black people look up to Just Us Books because of what we've done. And because of what we've done, there are other black folks who are now in the industry along with us. So we have really helped to change the narrative. We've helped to demonstrate that there is indeed a market. And guess what happened? The major publishers now have jumped into diversity and publishing black interest books like crazy. So when we first started, the field was really open to us. But now we have to compete with the major publishing houses because they recognize that there is a market. To sort of drive home why we do what we do, I'm going to recite a poem that I wrote a couple of years ago. It's called Storytellers. Tell the story about yesteryear and yesterday's ancestors, of a people uprooted and a home left behind, and turbulent waters crossed to a despicable faith. Tell the story about the pain and anguish and brutality, separation and inhumanity, and enduring too much, too often, too long. Tell the story, no matter what, tell the story. Tell the story about family love and community building, of a people making a way out of no way, crafting a legacy and charting a course for future generations. Tell the story about love and hope and faith and courage and rising still so much, so often, so high. No matter where, tell the story. Tell the story about contributions made and unrewarded, about a people who helped build a nation and shape the world in unmeasurable, insurmountable ways. Tell the story about the music and art, inventions, written and spoken word that uplift, inspire, encourage, and liberate. No matter when, tell the story. Tell the story about women so brave and regal, without whom there would be no story to tell. And the men and the children, theirs must be told too. Tell the story about all the heroes, heroines, martyrs, and valiant ones, the vanguard of the struggle for freedom. No matter how, tell the story. Tell the story in all its complexities, in all its fullness, of a people who defy the unimaginable imagination, to survive, endure, build, abound, and sometimes flourish. Tell the story, cast it prominently within the story of humankind, where it should always be and remain, no matter why, tell the story. Tell the story because we must tell it. It is our duty. Can't let it be hidden. Can't let it be taken away. Can't let it get pushed aside and lost among a morass of deniers. Tell the story. If we don't tell it, defend it, who will? It is a story that defines all of us, no matter who. Tell the story. And this is my other half.
Perfetto. Una buonasera per tutti, grazie mille alla Fiera di Bologna, grazie mille Dolores per questo invito e grazie a tutti quanti che siamo qui compartilhando storie molto simili nei nostri paesi.
Good afternoon. Thank you to you all, and thank you to the Fair of Bologna. Thank you, Dolores, for the invitation, and thank you to you all for being here, because we are here sharing similar stories from our own countries.
Parlo dal Brasile, dal terreno delle biblioteche comunitarie, radicate nei margini, nel profondo del paese. Parlo da un paese con disuguaglianza di opportunità della vita dalla nascita alla morte, eppure nella letteratura.
I'm talking from Brazil. I'm talking from the point of view of community libraries. I'm talking of a country rooted, a country at the edge in a way. I'm talking from the margins of this country. I'm talking from the depth of this country. And I'm talking from a country which is full of inequalities, unequal opportunities from birth to death, and unequal opportunities in literature as well.
La simmetria nella letteratura si manifesta non soltanto nell'accesso, ma pure nella creazione della letteratura. Anche lì, in Brasile, siamo più della metà della popolazione brasiliana. Siamo 57% di persone nere. Però, quando si parla della letteratura, dell'accesso alla letteratura nazionale, stiamo alla margine.
And there is a mismatch, a clear mismatch in literature from the point of view of access, but not only, also from the point of view of creating literature, of creating art. In Brazil, more than half of the population is black. We are 57% of the Brazilian population. And yet, when literature is discussed, access to national literature is denied to these people.
Noi, le donne nere, gli uomini neri, i bambini neri, sappiamo che esistiamo, pure se la nostra vita non stava scritta nei libri. Però, quelli che scrivevano i libri insistevano in dire che só esiste quello che sta scritto. E noi abbiamo bisogno, abbiamo necessitato pure di creare le nostre case editrici, formare i nostri scrittori per affermare la nostra esistenza.
We, black women, black men, black children, we know that we exist, and we knew we existed even though our life was our lives had never been written in books. But those who write books used to say that you exist only if your life is in a book, is written about. So we had to create our own literature. We had to create our own publishing houses so that we could have a title to existing.
I nostri primi testi literari erano più testi di storia. Cercavamo di scrivere la storia dei nostri leader, la nostra storia di luta. Non aveva tanto una preoccupazione letteraria, ma la necessità di lasciare scritto, affermare che esistiamo.
Our first literary works basically were about history. We wrote about our own history, our own lives, and how they had developed. And we did not have very many literary concerns then. What we wanted to do, what our need was to reaffirm our existence. We wanted to write down that we existed.
In un secondo momento è diventato il momento di parlare sulla poesia. La poesia come questo diritto al sogno, al protesto, alla rivendicazione, eppure perché per scrivere romanzi uno bisogna avere il tempo e la nostra letteratura è una letteratura del lavoro, perché dobbiamo lavorare, guadagnare la vita e nella fretta, nel tempo che resta, scrivere. Il nostro popolo ha scritto, la nostra gente ha scritto poesia.
Later on, the time of poetry came, but poetry which requires time, because if you want to write a novel, you need time, whereas we had to work. So in our literary efforts, we did not talk, we mostly focused on working. And this is what the very center of our first poetic efforts was.
In questo modo, di questa forma, la letteratura per l'infanzia in Brasile diventa una letteratura per conoscere la storia, per sapere da dove veniamo e dove vogliamo arrivare, una letteratura per lasciare di invergognarsi, perché la letteratura nazionale ha creato una vergogna su di noi. Noi avevamo vergogna del nostro colore, dei nostri capelli, del nostro naso, delle nostre labbra. Era bisogno avere una letteratura per non invergognarsi di chi è, una letteratura per conoscersi a se stesso, una letteratura per sapere che non siamo soli nel mondo. La nostra letteratura per l'infanzia è sempre una letteratura che parla di nosotros nel plurale.
Don't worry, it was very... okay, so in this way, in our country, our literature for children has become a literature that talks about our history, that talks about our roots, where we come from, but also it talks about where we want to go. And it's a literature that helps us stop feeling ashamed, because the so-called national literature has made us feel ashamed about how we wear our hair, our noses, our lips. So we needed a literature, a new literature, to stop feeling ashamed for what we were and for what we are. And now we know also that we are not alone in the world. So our literature, in a way, is a form of asserting, of reaffirming ourselves and our identities as plural individuals.
Grazie, Marco.
I think it's many points in common. I don't know if before we start the second round, someone will be discuss some points, or we would start the second point. Start the second point. I think you begin.
Okay, good afternoon. My name is Cheryl Willis Hudson, and I am delighted to share more about the Just Us book story with you. From the very beginning, Wade and I, so I can see, wanted to create wonderful books that centered the experiences and culture of Black children in the United States in the books that they read. As parents, it was very important that our own children could see themselves realistically, actively, and yes, joyfully depicted in books, not via prevailing stereotypes or simply being marginalized. We knew that representation matters in literature, whether locally or nationally, via the diaspora or globally. So what you will see in the images on the screen are some of the titles that we have published that reflect our company's principles and values. They range from concept books for toddlers through fiction for the teenage years. And as you view these titles, please keep in mind these key words that are essential to their creation: Black history, culture, and experiences, authenticity, diversity, inclusion, own voices, social justice, and Black joy. Our first published title, Afro-Bet's ABC book, established a signature and recognizable brand for Just Us Books with 6 diverse, engaging characters who simply twisted and turned their bodies into letters of the alphabet, thus Afro-Bets. There were also associated words and images. For example, A is for apple, alligator, and Africa. Later, we established an important collection of 46 biographies in the Afro-Bet's Book of Black Heroes from A to Z. This grew into a series of 3 other similar titles about women, political figures, and scientists. Our picture books are beautifully told and illustrated stories about everyday life. They center familiar experiences of childhood, and examples are Jamal's Busy Day, about a young boy who just loves to go to school. When I Was Little, about a youngster who goes fishing with his grandpa. Or The Secret Olivia Told Me, by an award-winning Coretta Scott King honor for illustration. And these are some of the books that you will see as picture books and concept books. Older readers can engage with characters in a chapter book series like Kid Caramel, a friendly 9-year-old neighborhood detective. Slightly older readers will relate to contemporary poetry of Tony Medina's The President Looks Like Me, or Derek Barnes' We Could Be Brothers. The importance of accuracy and authenticity is apparent in such nonfiction titles such as James Haskins' March on Washington, Papa's Free Day Party, I think you saw them earlier, and Kwame Nkrumah's Midnight Speech for Independence. Just Us Books has 2 imprints, which also reflect our core values, and they are Marimba Books, and Sankofa books. The I Love To series from Marimba Books reflects diversity within classroom and community settings. Picture books like I'm a Big Sister Now relates to inner family connections. And Sankofa books reach back to reissue classics that are previously, books that have been previously out of print. Justice Books, as Wade has said, has also collaborated with other trade publishers such as Scholastic and Zondervan, which is a division of HarperCollins. Thank you. And we also created We Rise, We Resist, We Raise Our Voices, The Talk, which is our conversations about race, love, and truth, and Recognize, an anthology honoring and amplifying Black life. All of these books are in partnership with the Crown Division of Penguin Random House. You've heard the words before: Black history, culture, experiences, authenticity, diversity, inclusion, own voices, social justice, Black joy. What does this all really mean? Why are our books important? Justice Books knows that good books make a difference in the lives of all children. They promote understanding across cultures by sharing diverse stories. Our books are culturally specific yet universal. They provide factual information and broaden our knowledge of history, culture, and experiences. They also promote empathy, and they help readers develop multiple perspectives. In the words of scholar Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop, our books provide mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors. From reading, hearing, and using culturally diverse materials like those produced by Just Us Books, people can learn that beneath the surface differences of color, culture, or ethnicity, all people experience universal feelings of love, sadness, self-worth, justice, and kindness. So, thank you very much for the opportunity to share the story and vision and philosophy of Just Us Books. If you want to find more information about Just Us Books, you can go to our website, justusbooks.com, and the same words on social media platforms. We're so happy to be here.
Your stand.
Yes, we're at stand 29 with the World Lounge of other publishers, and we are so grateful for the Bologna Children's Book Festival Fair to make this invitation possible for us to share this story. Thank you so much.
In the first presentation, I show about Colombian authors and also Colombian books, talking about or showing Afro theme or the topic, but I think it's a very recent story in Colombia, like 20 years or less than 20 years making picture books. I'm talking of picture books. In 2008, 2007 more or less, or before, I was searching books. I was trying to make a research of books in Colombia, and I noticed that there was not books, picture books with Afro topics. So I was thinking, why there are not this kind of book? Why there are not this topic? I am not an Afro-descendant. In Colombia, we are a mixture mixture of Afro, indigenous, and European. So we are very mixed people, yes. But there are not, in that moment, there was not a lot, there was not black illustrators of picture books. So I say, like, I want to make this kind of books. So I begin to make some of that books. And the first book, this one, Jacinto and Maria Jose, this book won the prize A la orilla del viento, who is the most important in Latin America for picture books. So for me, it was important because it was like an entrance of the topic also to Latin America, but because also in Latin America, it's like an invisibilization of the topic. So for me, it was important to be there, like introducing the topic and showing part of the culture of the Pacific and of Colombia. So I begin to make the research also of the place, and was like that. Like for me, it's difficult to be in a panel where I am not. I feel that I don't represent, but I feel the necessity as a Colombian author to make picture books. So after that, they become some works about Afro-culture. This is arrullos, I don't know the translation, but like different kinds of poetry, Colombian poetry, and they asked me for illustrate, so I make the illustrations of that book. So was like I begin to work in that topic. This book, Antonia Val Rio, that is also published in the United States, like as Antonia, A Journey to a New Home. In this book, I show the violence in Colombia, the immigration that is migration in the same country, because there are a lot of violence in Colombia from long years ago. We have three armies: the National Army, the guerrilla, and the paramilitary. So it's a lot of violence in our country, and a lot of people had left their home. And most of the people that had left their homes are indigenous people, native people, Afro-Colombian people, and farmers and people who live of the land. Thank you. So in this book, I wanted to show that problematics that have my country, and also to represent that communities that have more painful about for that situations. There are other kind of books. I think not everything must be like political or like talking about. This one is an informative book about whales. Yes, I forget in English, but this kind of whales that came from Antarctica until the Pacific of Colombia. But the Pacific of Colombia is the place where there are the most black population. So it was necessary also to represent and to give this information about the context. Also, this one is a book that, if you look at him, it's not a book that you say, hey, it's not about Afro-culture. No, it's about all the book is about a game with the V letter, and are vegetables that are walking, but at the end, the guy that is eating is a Afro guy. So it's not the necessity of showing, of talking about the problems. It's also to make poetry, to play with the illustrations, to play with the topic. So in other books like this, I made different kind of portraits, and some of the portraits also were some Afro women, and is that I think the most of my books are not with that topic. I have several books, but every time my production must precise, so I need to show. So it's like in my production always will be also this representation. Thank you. So difficult.
They're so beautiful. Thank you so much. So part two of that story that I started. So I went to the market because I just couldn't understand why these kids were so thrilled by this one book. And I kept thinking, weren't there other books like this? And I walked the market of Kaduna State and I couldn't find one beautifully illustrated book for children which depicted the children from that region of my country. And that's when I decided that the way forward would be to make myself a guinea pig and write for those children. So in northern Nigeria, there are 18 states. So I decided to write a book that was set in each of the states. It's been 3 years. I am on number 7 and 8. And if you want to see the ones that we have done, they are in our stall at the Spotlight in Africa section of the festival. So I started thinking about size, what the children want to read, what the parents are themselves interested in reading to their children. In particular, I was also interested in Black joy, in Nigerian joy, in showing that even though these children may not have so much, they still experience joy and love and family. I also wanted to talk about family structures and this obsession with the nuclear family, which is good, but the truth is when a child is born, they don't decide what sort of family that they are born into. And too often, they are held responsible for their situation. So one thing that I tried to do in the little books that I was writing was to ensure that there were different family structures. So after putting myself sort of going to school, understanding properly how to write for children, the number of pages, thinking in spreads, all those things that I needed to know, I got to the point where I decided, well, now that I have got this far, I can now start thinking about transferring that knowledge. And that's where the Bologna Book Fair, Children's Book Fair comes in. So Elena and I are both on the board of Publish Her, which is an organization that's dedicated to women within the publishing industry globally. And I called her one day and I said, listen, I really need to do something about children's books in my country. We have incredible artists. If you move around Nigeria, on nearly every street corner, you will find artists hanging up their portraits on the walls. There's so much talent. Everyone knows Nigeria, a Nigerian has won the Nobel, the Booker, the Women's Prize, name it. So the writing talent is there as well. So why wasn't that translating to a whole lot of children's books? And when I did find children's books, you know, it would be something like Dele is eating, Funke is running, you know? So people didn't often understand that idea of the words interacting with the images and even with graphic design. So I spoke to Elena about this problem and she connected me to the Master School of Illustration. So we in Nigeria have founded something called Bookstorm. And the idea is to publish 100 children's books by the end of 2027. And the way we're going to do that, thank you so much, is that we're going to train as many people as possible. So I'm not even thinking, oh, you need to be a writer to be trained. You could be a doctor, lawyer, market woman, whatever. You just need to dedicate some of your time every week to attending these virtual classes. So that's what we're doing. We're training writers, illustrators, graphic designers, editors, and agents. We need to grow the entire ecosystem and the infrastructure. It's not enough to have the writers and the books and not have anyone to market them. Last year, I was presented with the Aficionado Prize in Frankfurt Book Fair, and myself and my daughter were the only black people in the entire hall when I was given the award. And I'm happy that this time that I'm coming to Bologna, this is my second time, I have been somewhat impressed just by the diversity that I am beginning to see. It's not enough for them to publish books, or for us to publish books, but we want to be able to share our work with the rest of the world. We need to have some access into some of these global book marketplaces. So that's what we're working on, and that's why we have founded Bookstorm. Thank you.
Parlerò in fretta. E mi sento molto contemplata in quello che hanno detto voi. Siamo qui delle persone nere che hanno imparato che non si può dire niente su noi senza di nosotros, ma che abbiamo scelto le cose che vogliamo dire.
Be very fast. I feel very much in line and in tune with what you've said. We are all here, black people, who have learned that it's not possible to say something about us without us, because we are the ones who can talk.
E noi che lavoriamo con la promozione della lettura, la cosa importantissima che facciamo è studiare tutta la catena della produzione del libro, la creazione, la parte editoriale, la creazione dell'illustrazione, il testo. E abbiamo fatto questo, stiamo facendo questo con i giovani lettori, con le madri, con gli insegnanti.
We work to promote reading, and what we are doing is very important because we are trying to put together all the elements of the chain, from the creation to the text to the illustration to the publication. And so it's really important that we do this and we create this ecosystem in the literature.
Se il razzismo non è stato creato da nosotros, se la disuguaglianza razziale non abbiamo creato noi, vogliamo avere il diritto di parlare non solo di razzismo, vogliamo parlare della vita, dell'amore, del football, di qualsiasi argomento.
Since we did not create racism, since we did not create inequality, I think we have the right to talk about everything. We should not feel compelled to talk only about racism. We have the right to talk about life, love, football, whatever we want.
E per questo stiamo parlando in Brasile di una letteratura nera che parla sui vari temi che coinvolgono la gente nera, di una letteratura scritta per persone neras e anche di una letteratura afrocentrata e affettiva, una letteratura per i bambini, per i giovani, per gli adulti, amare di più se stessi, fare le pace con lo specchio.
For this reason, in Brazil, we are really working and we are talking about black literature, something that voices our opinion on various themes and issues that involve black people. A literature written for black children, from black adults, a literature which is Afro-centered and which, in a way, helps us love ourselves and make peace with a mirror in front of us.
Per finire, ho fatto la traduzione di un testo piccolo di una scrittrice negra brasiliana, Cidinha da Silva. Non credo che ci siano cose di cui solo io posso parlare. Se la penso così, limito i miei discorsi. Potrò parlare solo di ciò che ho vissuto e mi interessa molto fare fabulazione nella produzione letteraria, inventare il linguaggio, inventare i paesaggi, inventare i personaggi, inventare la trama. E tutti, come me, hanno il diritto di scrivere di quello che vogliono. Noi negri reivindicamos questo diritto di scrivere sulla nostra vita e sulla vita che sogniamo. Grazie mille.
To conclude, I'd like to posso vedere un attimo? To conclude, I'd like to read a translation which I've made of a Brazilian author, and she wrote, and this is: I don't believe that there are things that I am the only one entitled to write about. If this were true, I would limit the things that I can do. I would be able to talk only about my experience, whereas I'm interested in stories, in narratives, in literary production, in inventing language, landscapes, characters and plots. And everybody, like myself, has a right to write whatever they want to.
We need to finish because we passed the time, it's okay. Thank you very much. I think it's very, very important to have these discussions in Bologna, in all places, but in Bologna. And thank you very much.